The night before her flight, Luma's heart was full of hope. She had packed her small suitcase, carefully folding the clothes she had saved for months to buy, imagining the new life waiting for her abroad. But when she went to double-check her documents, her hands froze. The passport she had guarded so carefully was missing. She searched her bag, the table, the drawer, even under her bed, her heartbeat racing faster each second. Finally, she noticed something in the trash. Her hands shook as she pulled it out. It was her passport, torn into pieces, the pages ripped apart like useless paper. Before she could even cry, she heard a laugh behind her. Zaya, her older sister, stood in the doorway with folded arms and a cruel smile. She bent closer and whispered words that pierced Luma's soul. Roaches don't deserve wings. Her tone was calm, almost mocking, but it carried the weight of years of jealousy. Luma's chest tightened as if the air had been stolen from her. That single sentence crushed everything she had worked for. The late nights studying, the hours of saving, the dream she thought was finally within reach. Luma's knees gave way and she sank to the floor, holding the shredded pages close to her chest. She couldn't believe it was real. Her own sister had destroyed the one thing that stood between her and the future she had prayed for. Tears blurred her vision, but Zaya only turned and walked away, her smirk still on her face. In that moment, the house felt colder than ever before. Luma wanted to scream, to beg, to ask why, but the silence of the room answered her. The passport lay in pieces in her trembling hands, and so did her heart. That night, her world shattered, not because of strangers, but because of the person she had trusted the most. And the words, "Roaches don't deserve wings," kept echoing in her mind, burning deeper than the tears falling down her face. Since she was a little girl, Luma always carried a dream in her heart. She would sit under the old mango tree in her village and stare at the sky, imagining planes flying above her. She wanted to be inside one of them, leaving her small town to build a bigger, brighter life. While other children laughed and played, she read borrowed books, studied under dim light, and promised herself that one day she would leave. She never said much about her plans, because whenever she tried to speak, her family laughed at her. They told her she was wasting her time, that girls like her were meant to marry early, stay home, and live quietly. But Luma refused to let their words bury her dreams. As she grew older, she worked harder. She sold snacks in the market, washed clothes for neighbors, and saved every little coin she could. Sometimes she hid the money in an old jar under her bed, because she knew if her family found out, they would take it from her. Nights were not for resting, they were for studying. Even when her eyes grew heavy, she pushed herself, whispering that every page she read was one step closer to her future. Years passed, and all that sacrifice finally turned into something real. Luma received a letter of employment from a company abroad. It wasn't just any job. It was the kind of opportunity that could change her life completely. For the first time, she felt the world opening its arms to her. Her hands shook with excitement as she read the letter, imagining herself walking into tall buildings, earning real money, sending something back home, and finally proving to herself that all her struggles were worth it. But when she shared the news at home, instead of joy, she met coldness. Zaya, her older sister, scoffed and said, "So, you think you're better than us now, just because some foreign company sent you a letter?" Her words cut deep. Their mother did not smile either. She only muttered that Luma was chasing shadows, that girls who dreamed too big always ended up broken. Even her younger cousins laughed, calling her a fool for thinking she could survive in another country. Each reaction felt like a stone thrown at her heart. She had hoped, at least once, to be embraced, to hear someone say, "We are proud of you," but there was none of that. Instead, her own family turned her biggest joy into a moment of shame. Yet deep inside, Luma held onto the letter tightly, as if it was a shield against their doubts. They could mock her, they could laugh, but she knew the truth. Her dream was not built on their approval. It was built on her own sweat, tears, and endless nights of faith. And nothing, not even their cruel words, could take that away from her. Zaya was not always filled with anger. When they were younger, she even held Luma's hand while walking to school. She used to braid Luma's hair and sometimes share her food with her. But as the years passed, something changed inside her heart. She began to notice how people spoke about Luma. Teachers praised her for being bright, neighbors admired her hard work, and even strangers said she was different. Each word of praise for Luma felt like a silent reminder to Zaya of what she did not have. She was the older sister, yet somehow it was the younger one who shined. At first, Zaya tried to ignore it, but envy has a way of growing quietly. When Luma passed her exams with high marks, Zaya smiled on the outside, but felt a sharp sting inside. When Luma managed to save money by doing small jobs, Zaya pretended not to care, but secretly wondered why she never had the same courage. Each achievement by Luma became a mirror, reflecting Zaya's own struggles back at her. She began to feel smaller, like her own life was being pushed into the shadows. The day the letter came confirming Luma's job abroad, Zaya's jealousy reached its peak. She watched Luma's eyes light up with joy, and something inside her cracked. That letter was not just paper. It was proof that Luma was stepping into a life she herself had never even dreamed of. Zaya thought about all the years she had spent in the same house, with the same routine, with no escape in sight. Now her younger sister was about to fly away and leave her behind. It wasn't only jealousy, it was fear. Zaya feared being forgotten. She feared that one day, when people spoke about their family, they would only mention Luma's name and not hers. She felt as though her identity as the older sister would mean nothing once Luma's success began. The more she thought about it, the more bitterness took over her heart. So when she saw Luma's passport on the table, the anger and envy she had been hiding for years exploded. To Zaya, that passport was not just a travel document. It was a symbol of everything she had lost and everything Luma had gained. It reminded her of every time she had been compared, every time she felt invisible, every time she wondered why her life had turned out so different. Her hands trembled as she held it, but not with guilt, with a strange satisfaction. She convinced herself that by tearing it, she was not just destroying a passport. She was pulling Luma back down, making sure her sister would remain where she was, in the same house, in the same town, under the same roof. Zaya told herself that it was balance, that it was fair, but deep down she knew the truth. It was not fairness, it was resentment. Years of hidden pain finally spilling out in the cruelest way. Luma's hands were still shaking when she picked up the torn pieces of her passport from the floor. Her heart was racing, her eyes swollen from tears, but in that moment she thought of only one person who could help her, her mother. She rushed down the narrow hallway, clutching the pieces tightly, hoping that a mother's love would be strong enough to make things right. She found her sitting on the wooden chair outside, peeling vegetables in the dim light. For a moment, Luma felt relief. This was her mother, the woman who once carried her, the woman who should protect her when the world turned cruel. With a broken voice, she held out the shredded passport and cried, "Mama, look what Zaya did. She destroyed it. How will I travel now? Please, say something. Please tell me you will help me." She waited for arms to wrap around her, for words to calm her heart. But what came instead was silence. Her mother's eyes flickered to the torn papers, then slowly shifted away. She continued peeling, as though nothing had happened. The silence was heavier than any insult. Luma's chest tightened as she whispered again, "Mama, please, this was my dream. You know how hard I worked for this." But her mother did not speak. She only pressed her lips together and kept her eyes fixed on the vegetables in her hand. It was as if her daughter's pain was invisible, as if Zaya's cruelty was not something to question, but something to accept. That moment broke something inside Luma, more than the torn passport ever could. She realized her mother would not fight for her, not even when she was wronged so openly. The woman she thought would protect her chose silence. As though Luma's suffering did not matter, it felt like betrayal wrapped in quietness. Zaya's mocking words still rang in her ears, but her mother's cold silence cut even deeper. It told her that she was alone in this fight. It told her that no matter how much she sacrificed, working extra hours to bring home food, studying late into the night to make them proud, she would never be seen as worthy in their eyes. That night, as she sat alone in her room, the reality settled in her heart. She had given her family everything she could, and in return, they had given her nothing but doubt, jealousy, and silence. She realized that the people she thought would stand by her in her hardest moment would never truly choose her. The house she called home was not a place of safety anymore. It was a place where her dreams were mocked, her pain ignored, and her hopes crushed. From that silence, Luma learned a painful truth. Sometimes the deepest wounds are not caused by enemies, but by the ones you love most, the ones who choose to look away when you need them the most. Luma shut the door of her small room and locked it, her body trembling as if the world outside was pressing down on her. She sat on the floor, her knees pulled close to her chest, holding the shredded passport in her hands. The torn pages slipped through her fingers like ashes, each piece a reminder of everything she had fought for. As she looked at them, she felt the weight of every word ever spoken against her, when they said she was too small to matter, too foolish to dream, too weak to survive on her own. Those voices echoed in her head louder than ever, and for a moment she believed them. Her tears fell freely, soaking the papers until the ink smudged. She thought of the years she had spent saving, the nights she studied with her lamp burning until her eyes hurt, the sacrifices she made while her friends enjoyed their youth. All of it felt wasted now. She whispered to herself, asking why life had to be so cruel, why the people she loved most were the ones breaking her the hardest. Her sobs shook her body, and she pressed her face into her hands, feeling as though the ground beneath her was collapsing. The night stretched on, and her room grew darker, but Luma could not sleep. Her mind replayed the image of Zaya's cruel smile, the sound of her mother's silence, and the sight of her broken passport. Each memory was like fire burning her heart. She cried until her voice was hoarse, until her body felt drained. Yet somewhere inside that exhaustion, another feeling began to rise. It was faint at first, like a spark in the ashes, but it grew stronger the more she thought about everything she had endured. She lifted her head slowly, her swollen eyes staring at the torn pages on the floor. Something hardened inside her chest. Yes, her passport was gone, but her will was not. She realized that every insult, every rejection, and every betrayal had not destroyed her. Instead, they had tested her, and though she felt broken, she was still breathing, still alive, still capable of fighting again. Luma wiped her tears with the back of her hand, her breaths heavy but steadying. She picked up the pieces of her passport one by one and placed them carefully in a small box. She promised herself she would not let this be the end of her dream. Zaya thought she had clipped her wings, but Luma knew deep down that her wings were not made of paper. They were made of determination, of pain turned into strength. That night, alone in her room, she transformed her tears into fire. The same fire that had carried her through years of struggle now burned brighter than ever. And though no one else could see it, Luma knew a storm had awakened inside her, one that no one, not even her own family, could stop. The morning sun crept into Luma's room, but she did not feel its warmth. Her eyes were heavy from a night of crying, her heart still aching as she stared at the box holding her shredded passport. She had not slept, only sat awake thinking of how quickly her dream had been torn apart. She felt defeated, but deep inside, the small fire she had discovered in herself kept whispering that this could not be the end. Still, she did not know where to start, who to turn to, or how to fix what had been broken. Just then, there was a gentle knock on her door. She wiped her face quickly, not wanting anyone to see her weakness. When she opened it, she found Tovi, their neighbor, standing there. He was holding a small bag of bread, his usual way of greeting, but his eyes studied her carefully. Tovi had lived next door for years, a quiet man who often offered small help when he could, fixing a broken lock, carrying water when the tap failed. Luma had always thanked him politely, never knowing that behind his calm smile, he had noticed her struggles more than anyone else. "Luma," he said softly, "I heard some noise last night. Are you all right?" His voice carried genuine concern, something she had not felt in her own home. At first she wanted to hide everything, to pretend she was fine, but the weight of her pain pressed too heavy. Tears filled her eyes again as she whispered, "My passport. Zaya tore it. My flight is tomorrow. It's over." She held the box out to him, showing the shredded pieces, and lowered her head in shame. For a long moment, Tovi said nothing. He simply looked at the torn papers, then at her face. But instead of pity, his eyes carried something different. Belief. "No," he finally said, firm but gentle. "It's not over. You've worked too hard for this. We will find a way." Luma blinked, confused. No one in her family had spoken those words to her, not once. She shook her head, saying it was impossible, but Tovi only smiled faintly. I know people at the embassy. I know who to call. We may not have much time, but we can try. Don't give up yet." His certainty wrapped around her like a blanket of hope. For the first time since her world had broken, Luma felt a hand lifting her up instead of pushing her down. Tovi didn't mock her, didn't stay silent, didn't call her foolish. He simply believed in her. That simple belief lit up something inside her stronger than any insult could destroy. As the day grew brighter, Luma followed Tovi out of the house, clutching the box of torn pages. She didn't know what would happen, but she knew this. Even if her family had abandoned her, she was not alone. Someone finally saw her worth, and that was enough to give her the strength to fight again. Luma and Tovi stepped out into the morning streets with urgency in their steps. The air felt heavy, every passing hour reminding Luma of the ticking clock. Her flight was scheduled for the next day, yet her passport lay in torn pieces inside a box. She clutched it tightly, not because it was useful anymore, but because it reminded her of what she was fighting for. Tovi walked beside her, his calm voice guiding her through the storm, though even he knew the task ahead was almost impossible. Their first stop was the embassy. They waited in a long line under the heat, Luma's heart pounding each time the queue moved forward. When it was finally her turn, she explained everything in a trembling voice, showing the ruined passport as proof. The officer frowned, shaking his head. "Emergency replacements take weeks, not hours," he said flatly. Luma felt her knees weaken, but before she could give up, Tovi leaned forward and spoke firmly, asking to see a supervisor. His words carried weight, and though it didn't open every door, it kept them from being pushed away completely. Hours passed as they moved from one office to another, filling forms, making endless phone calls, knocking on doors that were often closed to people like Luma. Each rejection hit her like a blow. Each no, another reminder of how fragile her dream was. Yet every time she wanted to sink, Tovi's voice steadied her. "We keep going," he repeated. His belief in her was stronger than the walls they faced. The day grew older, the sky dimming as the hours slipped away. Luma's body ached from running, her voice cracked from pleading, but inside her burned a determination she had never felt before. She remembered the night she cried over the shredded pages, the cruel smile on Zaya's face, her mother's silence. Those memories gave her no choice but to keep moving. She could not allow them to win. She could not let her dream die in the dust of rejection. At one point, she collapsed onto a bench outside, her hands shaking, her chest tight with despair. "Maybe they're right," she whispered. "Maybe it's too late." But Tovi sat beside her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "No," he said firmly. "You've carried this dream too long to drop it now. If they close 10 doors, we knock on 11. If they say it's impossible, we prove them wrong." His words reignited her spirit, and she stood again, ready to keep fighting. As the night crept closer, their final call came. A small chance, a slim possibility. Luma clutched the phone, her heart racing as the voice on the other end promised to try. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was enough. Enough to remind her that even when the world shouted impossible, she still had the courage to believe. And so, with Tovi by her side, she prepared to keep running until the very last second. While Luma and Tovi ran from one office to another, Zaya sat at home with a smile on her face. She moved around the house lightly, humming as if she had done something clever. In her mind, the battle was already won. She pictured Luma sitting in her room, crying over those shredded pages, and the thought filled her with satisfaction. To Zaya, this was justice. She had stopped her younger sister from flying higher, from leaving her behind, from making her feel small again. When her friends visited later that day, Zaya pulled them aside and whispered the story with pride. She told them how Luma's passport had been torn to pieces, how her big dreams had come crashing down. "She'll never leave now," Zaya said, her eyes gleaming with a cruel sense of victory. Her friends gasped at first, but soon some of them laughed along, nodding as if they understood her point. They didn't see it as evil. They saw it as a sister keeping balance in the home. Zaya enjoyed the attention, the way people leaned closer to hear her speak. For once, she was the one in the spotlight, not Luma. No one was praising Luma's hard work or admiring her courage. Instead, they were listening to Zaya, the sister who had the power to stop her from rising. She felt taller, stronger, as though she had finally won a fight that had been going on for years in silence. But what Zaya did not know was that her laughter was empty. She believed she had clipped Luma's wings, but she did not understand that Luma's wings were not made of paper. They were not tied to a passport. They were built from years of tears, nights of sacrifice, and a heart that refused to stay broken. Even as Zaya boasted, Luma was out there fighting for her future with every ounce of strength left in her. Zaya could not see the determination burning in her sister's eyes, the fire that no amount of cruelty could put out. She thought the story was over, that she had written the final chapter of Luma's dream. But the truth was, she had only lit the spark that would push Luma harder. Zaya's cruel laughter filled the walls of their home, but it could not reach beyond them. It could not silence the prayers Luma whispered under her breath, or the hands of kindness that reached out to help her. For every smile Zaya wore in victory, Luma carried 10 steps forward in courage. Zaya believed she had won, but she had underestimated the power of a heart that refuses to give up. One day soon, she would learn that real strength is not in tearing someone down, but in rising after being broken. And when that day came, her cruel laughter would turn into silence. Luma sat in the waiting area of the airport, with her heart sinking lower every minute. The line at the check-in counter was already thinning, and she had nothing in her hands except a folder full of rejection letters. Everyone around her seemed to be moving forward, showing their documents, passing security, while she sat frozen in her chair. The clock above her head ticked loudly in her ears, reminding her that the plane she had dreamed of boarding was about to leave without her. For the first time, she almost allowed herself to believe that maybe her sister had won, that maybe this journey was never meant for her. But then, in the middle of that storm of despair, her phone rang. She stared at the screen, not recognizing the number. With shaking fingers, she picked up, and a calm voice on the other end said, "Miss Luma, your emergency replacement document has been approved. Come to the desk immediately." She didn't move at first, thinking it had to be a mistake, but the voice repeated it firmly, giving her details she knew were real. Her legs carried her before her mind could even catch up. She rushed to the counter, breathless, and when the officer handed her the new document, she could hardly believe it. Her hands trembled so hard, she almost dropped it. For days she had been running between offices, begging for a miracle, and now, here it was, placed right into her palm when she had lost all hope. Tears burned her eyes, but she kept moving, clutching the paper tightly, like it was her life itself. The final boarding call echoed through the hall. She sprinted toward the gate, people turning to watch her, but she didn't care. Every step felt like she was carrying not just her own dream, but every insult, every rejection, every cruel laugh that had tried to break her. She reached the gate, just as the attendant was about to close it. Breathless, she handed over her new document. The woman checked it, stamped it, and smiled. "You made it," she said. Luma's knees almost gave way from relief. Walking down the jet bridge, her chest rose and fell like she had run 1,000 miles. The plane stood before her, shining like a promise that her story was only beginning. She found her seat, sank down, and let out the breath she had been holding for years. She was not just boarding a flight. She was boarding her freedom, her future, her proof that nothing could keep her chained. Back at home, Zaya's laughter froze on her lips. The news reached her quickly. Luma had done the impossible. She had boarded that plane against every odd, every scheme, every cruel word meant to stop her. What was meant to be Zaya's victory turned into her greatest defeat. Her mocking whispers turned into silence. Her confidence shattered. Luma's wings had not been clipped. They had only grown stronger. And as the plane lifted off the ground, carrying her toward a new chapter, she knew her fight had been worth it. She had turned despair into triumph, and the whole world was about to witness it. Months later, Luma was sitting in her small but beautiful apartment abroad, watching the sun rise through her window. Every morning reminded her of the struggle she had faced before getting here, the nights of running between embassies, the tears, the fear of losing everything. She carried all of it in her heart, but instead of pain, it now gave her strength. She had made it. She had won the battle that everyone said she would lose. Back home, people still whispered about the night her sister shredded her passport. Some pitied her, thinking her dreams had ended there. Others laughed behind her back, believing she would never recover. But they did not know the full story. They did not know how she had fought until the very last second, how she had refused to let betrayal steal her future. Zaya, the sister who once laughed in secret, could only watch from afar now. Her mocking words, "She'll never leave now," had turned into bitter silence. The victory she thought she had gained disappeared in front of her eyes. No apology, no regret could erase what she had done. And yet, Luma did not waste her new life thinking of revenge. She knew that true justice was not in hurting Zaya back, it was in rising above her cruelty. At work abroad, Luma was already making a name for herself. Her colleagues admired her determination, her passion, and the way she carried herself with quiet dignity. She sent money home to her mother, not because she had forgotten the pain, but because she wanted to show that kindness could survive even the deepest wounds. There were nights when memories returned. Zaya's laughter, the sound of paper tearing, the panic in her chest as she thought everything was lost. But instead of breaking her, those memories reminded her of her strength. She realized that what Zaya had destroyed was only paper, but what she had built inside herself was unshakable. One evening, Luma stood by her window, writing in her journal. She smiled softly and wrote, "She thought she clipped my wings, but all she did was make me fly higher." That single thought captured everything she had lived through. Her story was no longer about betrayal, it was about survival, courage, and victory. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. Her life abroad, her peace of mind, her success, these were her answers. Zaya's betrayal had been a chapter, but it was not the ending. Luma had written her own ending, one filled with hope and triumph. And so, Luma rose above, not with hate, not with revenge, but with strength that could never be torn apart. Because in the end, success was the loudest reply, and she had given it beautifully.